When I tell you I'm making a game about exploring an island by travelling around on a steam train, what is it that comes into your head? Something like this? Or this? Maybe you're expecting something like this. Hey, it's Ollie from Mashup Games. Let me tell you how my game went from like this to this. When I started making the game back in the beginning of 2023, I didn't really know what art style I'd be going for. I knew I still wanted something to show off as some kind of concept art, so I made a test scene where I could get an idea of what the game could look like. Just kind of threw in whatever models I had made at that moment and used Unity's terrain to paint a path and add some very basic trees. Obviously these trees look bad as they're just stacked cones, and the tracks are just kind of stretched rectangles, but as far as it looks overall, I quite like it, though bear in mind I am indecisive and things will change quite a lot. One of the games that popped into my head when I was thinking about the art of railway life was one of its inspirations: Animal Crossing New Horizons. It was the first Animal Crossing game I played, and in 2020 it sold millions of units and became many people's introduction into the cozy genre. The mood of the game is calm, welcoming and comforting, and it's emphasised in the art style through its use of bright colours, models with rounded edges, soft lighting, and simple cartoony textures. It's also very common for cozy games made by small teams to adopt a similar style with focusing more on simple colours and gradients. After all, what's easier to make? Or this? When you're working either with a small handful of people or just by yourself, you need to be careful of how you devote your time. And so by going for an art style that doesn't require you to spend ages adding lots of detail to everything, it speeds up the process of making game assets, and you can use that time for other areas of the game. Plus, the game still looks good. I tried to adopt a bright, colourful look for my next iteration. It does pop quite a bit more, and the train does stand out against the background, which is what we want. How I made this look so vibrant was kind of a cheat though. I plugged the material's colour into its emissive property. Emission in a material essentially is what makes it glow, and by having the emission strength on the low value, I can make the objects shine just a little bit. But just a little bit though. Want the same effect your phone gives you when you check it at night. I took a few screenshot variations of this art test with different colours and the like, and very quickly, I didn't like the grass and the trees. Turns out, these are two things that I'm going to change a lot. But first things first, after a few months of developing the game, I ended up not liking how it looked. Obviously so, since the art of the game so far has been either prototype models like the trees or first attempt models like the train and the player. I did do this on purpose so I could focus more on making the track system and other mechanics, but as a creative person I can only look at this so much before I go, I can fix them. And if I want to try out new art styles, I need the right environment to test them in. So I constructed this. A diorama consisting of rails and fences, a station, the train, trees, and a house with some walls and bushes. All this was essentially to test different types of trees, but also two different lighting styles, whether I wanted the game to be lit or unlit. I wanted to test this out for 3 reasons. The first is that I don't really like how shadows work in Unity, as they tend to have a low quality resolution. This may just be a setting I need to tweak, but I wasn't a fan first off. And the other 2 reasons were, of course, the grass and the trees. I've tried to make grass, but well, it didn't turn out great. I found that if I turned the material from lit to unlit, it actually looked cleaner for me. Looking at these dioramas side by side, I actually prefer the unlit trees. They look much better than the lit ones, but that's because these trees set the bar very low. What looks better to you? Green blob with a slight gradient but no detail at all, or green blob that's been stabbed multiple times by leaves? Other than that though, I prefer the lit diorama. Playing with lighting could be so powerful for this type of game, and though I don't know that much at this time about lighting, I can learn. So, along the lines of learning, I went back to the drawing board on the tree to see if I could have another crack at it. I could have gone on the asset store and just found some trees there, but I didn't think those trees fit the aesthetic, and also there's nothing wrong with wanting to have a go at making my own. It's like my favourite saying goes, always reinvent the wheel. In my tree research, or should I say tree search, I found this video by Pontus Carlson that relied on shaders to rotate the quads on a mesh into billboards so they're always facing the camera. And it was the type of tree I was hoping to make, but for some reason I couldn't get it to work in Unity's shader graph. I'd found something on Blender called geometry nodes, and one of the many things it can do is create instances of a mesh on the point of another mesh. And if I make the texture of a plane a cutout of some leaves, then I can hide the sphere and you've got something not far off a tree. And I finally got a tree I was content with. Putting these in the game was probably the first time when making this game I looked at it and I was like, this actually looks nice. Now I didn't really know much about trains when starting this game. As I stated on a previous video,
Say I didn't really know anything about trains. My knowledge went as far back as my childhood memories of Thomas and Friends.
So, as part of my research, I've been travelling around and visiting heritage railways for inspiration. Around the time I made these trees in 2023, I had also visited the Talaclan Railway in Wales for the first time. And coincidentally enough, when there, I also found out that the nearby Corris Railway was holding their model railway exhibition that same weekend. I hadn't been to a model railway exhibition before. In fact, I don't think I've seen many model railways in my life. So I went along and was amazed by what was there. The amount of time and effort to create these was really something, and it's crazy to see the level of detail in some of these creations. And after seeing a few more railways, both the life-size heritage version and the model version, I started to get an idea of what I want this game to look like. I'm fascinated with how much detail modelers can pack into a tiny space, but it's unrealistic for me to try and do the same within my game. These sets are like personal artworks, handcrafted often for months or even years, and though I wish I could, I also want to release a game sometime this decade. And so if I want to do something similar, I'll have to compromise and cut some corners. The style I want to aim for in railway life is what I consider to be a blend of realism and cartoon, a sort of stylized blend of realistic environments shown in a not so realistic lens. I want to call this performative realism, but I think a more appropriate term is lazy realism, because let's be honest, if I wanted to make this realistic, then I'd be spending weeks just modelling rocks alone. I think the closest there is to what I want to achieve is, and you're probably going to laugh when I say this, because I haven't mentioned it enough at this point, but Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends. Talking about specifically the classic seasons, not only the use of modelling to portray a realistic railway and environment, but also the framing of it to create beautiful canvas shots is just breathtaking, and it always looks so charming. I've seen quite a few model sets by now, and though they're always incredible to see the amount of dedication it takes into creating them, I always seem to find them a bit too realistic with the colours. Thomas seems to play more with its colours, especially in the engines, to portray some kind of idealistic view of the world. Bricks! Sorry, I didn't have a good segue for this. I want to talk about bricks now. And I'm talking about bricks specifically because I think it's a good representation of the evolution in which my art went to get to where it is now. The first version was a flat brick texture where the bricks are oddly rounded and cartoony. And if you wonder why it's looking all weirdly red and blue, I'm splitting this texture into the RGB values, so I can split the bricks from the mortar. This way I can pass in two different colours into the shader and it would combine the two without mixing them. And while we're working on the bricks, I also had a go at my own normal map too. Normal maps help give the illusion of a flat texture being 3D by controlling how lighting will interact with it. Now, I didn't really know anything about making normal maps at the time, and I knew that Unity texture import settings had an option to generate a normal map from a grayscale texture. So in my attempt, I made a separate texture that was just blurring the edges of the rocks. The normal map does shape their bricks a bit more, but because I didn't do it very well, it ended up rounding the brick edges, which isn't what I wanted. However, a couple months later, I did a random experiment to see how the game would look if the world's textures were a bit more lifelike. Though this didn't stick around, and it does look a little bit like a PS2 game, I found it quite interesting as a little experiment, and I did also make these new brick textures as part of it. These bricks were a lot more uniform and straight, and I had learned a little more about making normal maps, so I managed to shape the edges better, as well as use noise to create bumps. I think it's a good example of the art style I want to achieve, combining simple textures and shaders to produce what I want with more performance. Anyways, it's back to the grass. Since my initial problem with lit grass was that it was too busy, I thought that making the grass blades thicker or just scaling up the grass would fix the issue. And don't get me wrong, it looks alright, but well, like the bricks, I wanted to make something which is less but more. The previous grass was using mesh models for each blade, which isn't bad on performance with things like mesh instancing, but I went for a different method in my next approach. One common way of rendering grass was to have a single square mesh and drawing a cutout texture onto it. While this is just two squares overlapping, once you apply the material, it looks like a little patch of grass. And this is what the grass looks like now. It does what I need, and it shouldn't be too costly to render on less powerful devices too. Oh, and since I'm redoing things, guess what else I redid? That's right, trees! Because I've used geometry nodes to create instances, it ended up creating a lot of instances. Like, there's a lot of cards here that are just not needed, and it bloats the tree mesh. Secondly, the trees look pretty good from above, but if you view it from a lower angle, they end up, well, not looking that good. Like when you take a selfie on your phone, you look good if you hold your phone up high, but once you move your phone down below, oh yikes. I found this other YouTube video by CG Geek where they used Blender's particle system to create the tree leaves. I remember watching this video before, but I had just assumed that since it was using Blender's particle system, I wouldn't be able to import it into Unity. But when having a go myself, I noticed that you can convert the particle system to instances, just like you could with geometry nodes. So now that I have that figured out, here's what the trees look like now. In my opinion, they look a bit more natural and less bulbous, and probably the best thing is that the vertex count is 40% less than the previous version, meaning I can have more of these trees for less of the cost. Some might say that they prefer the other trees, and I can see why, but in my opinion the new ones match the grass and world better, and they're also just quicker and easier to make, which means I'll be able to make more variations of trees quicker. So now that I have a good grasp on my art style, I wanted to make up a test scene to test what everything is, like a culmination of all the work I've done. I have this station here that's mostly just been blocked out, and is a simple candidate for a makeover. This is what it looks like now. See you around and have a great day. Bye!